Kate Pickett yesterday made my life very difficult with all these verifiable statistics. So I'll just give you one or two. I'm not sure how verifiable they are, but I've read them. And they kind of go in my direction, so I use them anyway. So one was a study in Malmö, in the city of Malmö, and this was told to me by a professor called Adam Arvidsson, so he's responsible for the veracity of the fact. The study said that 52% of the citizens of Malmö, Swedish city, just across the bridge from Copenhagen, were involved in peer production. This is about 5 years ago. An American report called A Fair Use Economy calculates that the economy around shared resources in the US is 1/6 of GDP and 17 million workers. So I'm just mentioning this because a lot of people just don't know what peer-to-peer is already. They still don't know what peer-to-peer is and think it's a marginal, emerging, and of course it is in a way, but it's also something that's already there. It's not something that, has to come. Another statistic, which shows you the cultural shift. This is from the Edelman Trust Barometer. I'm not sure if they do this every year or every 2 years. But they had a very interesting one in 2007. So in 2003, they asked people, who do you trust? This is in the major European, United States, but also China and Brazil and some countries like that. 70% would say at that time, I trust institutions, doctors, hospitals, parties, things like that. And 20% were answering people like me, peers. In 2007, guess what? 20% of the people answer they trust institutions, and 70% answer I trust people like me. So the peer-to-peer revolution as a cultural factor, it's already over. We are already in that shift where people start looking differently at the world. Now, if you like movies, I would like to mention, what's the name of that movie again? Cloverfield. I don't know, has anybody not seen Cloverfield? I've seen it like 7 times. This is a peer-to-peer Godzilla movie. I don't know if you remember how it looks like, right? So there's never any God's point of view in Cloverfield, right? You never see the monster because it's always filmed from the point of view of a peer. And remember this scene where the monster is passing by, the army is following the monster, and you think, okay, now finally some action. No, because whatever his name was, Ted, he was looking at his peers on the other side of the street. So you don't see the battle between the monster. So, in terms of artistic terms, right, in terms of how people see the world, this movie is very typical for the peer-to-peer era. It shows how you can see the world in a really different way, as constituted by these partial visions of peers looking at the same object, and by combining the vision of these people, different visions, you eliminate the object more and more, and you get to know the object better and better, right? It's a quite different vision from the objective vision, where you think, we can see the world as an individual person according to some objective rules. Okay, so this is just kind of a little introduction. Okay, one more thing. This is personal. I was a startupper. I had 2 internet startups in the late 90s. And in April 2001, we had the internet crash. Remember that? Okay, if you would read the business press at that moment, what were they saying? They were saying it's the end of the internet innovation. There's no more money. And what happened? Innovation increased exponentially. This is for me the moment where I realized that today, innovation is no longer located in the entrepreneurial Schumpeterian class. It's actually located in civil society. The entrepreneurs had no money. Civic society was continuing to innovate at a very rapid scale what the internet meant. So for me, that was the sign that civic society had become a productive resource, was actually creating value, technical, scientific innovation. Okay, one last statistics. I have to compete with Kate, so I have to have a few, right? Otherwise, nobody takes me seriously. Okay, so this is a Dutch commons researcher called Tine de Moor. No, she's actually Belgian, and she wrote a little book called Homo Corporans. In that book, there is a statistic. It counts the number of civic and cooperative initiatives in the Netherlands from the 1980s onwards. Okay, what do we see? From 1980 to 2005, a linear progression of civic and cooperative initiatives. From 2005, before the crisis, this is important, I think, an exponential rise. A continuous exponential rise of civic initiatives. Just an anecdote. I went to a meeting in Amsterdam. It was organized by the Transition Town movement, you know, who prepared the energy descent, and the We Share movement, which is about the collaborative economy. And both of them had a map of Amsterdam. And you know, when you show the initiatives, these red arrows come up. In both cases, the map became invisible. So in other words, there are so many initiatives in a city like Amsterdam that are not corporate, that are not state, that you cannot see the map. Every street has several initiatives. People are constructing a new society as we speak. The transition has begun. Don't read it in the newspaper, they're not talking about it, right? But if you're in the right networks, you will see that this is happening. So what is peer-to-peer? And I think it's important to really carefully define it, because there's a kind of neoliberal version of it. For example, in the Netherlands, when they talk about peer-to-peer, they're talking about marketplaces. Peer-to-peer marketplaces. Well, it's a market. It's a distributed market, but it's still a market. It's not very different from what we're doing today, right? And they talk about the sharing economy, but actually they mean the renting economy from Airbnb, right? And they mean Uber. And this is not sharing. You're paying for a commodity, right? Okay, so this is not what we're talking about, although there is some relationship to it, but because it's also the same kind of type of technology which made that possible, right? So what is peer-to-peer? Well, I follow the relational grammar of Alan Page Fisk. This is a very boring book, 1,000 pages. And he says, across all regions of the world, in all time periods, there's 4 basic ways in which humans allocate resources to each other. So it's in that context you have to read it. The first one, it's the gift economy. The tribal economy, like the potlatch from the Native Americans, right? You have a party in which you give your surplus away. You invite the neighboring tribe or clan or family. You have your party and they say, wow, that was great. But next year, they have to do their party. It has to be bigger than yours. So you compete through gifting, and the gifting creates the inequality. Because Razigan gave me something yesterday, I now feel obliged to give him something back. And he calls it equality matching, paradoxically enough, right? So this was the main driver of resource allocation, not barter. It was the gift economy in the tribal economy. Okay, then we have what he calls authority ranking. You know, the hierarchical class societies, right? Where according to your place, you're a lord, you're the peasant, and you get whatever is socially, you know, decided in that society. The third one is market pricing. But the fourth one is the most interesting. There's a nice little book called Societies Against the State. I think that's from Pierre, I forgot, sorry, an anthropologist. Somebody remember? Clastre, yeah, that's it, Pierre Clastre. So here's one of the scenes I remember. So a hunter in an Amazonian tribe goes hunting with his buddies, and he comes back with a deer. What happens when he comes back? Well, not like in the movies where, you know, the chief hunter takes the best piece. No, not at all. Or like monkeys do it that way, right? No. He's the last one. Because the deer is not from him. It's for the family. The family is a commons, right? And they have rules for distributing this whole amongst the members of that community. So communal shareholding has always existed, but it was a marginal thing that existed within small communities. And here's the tragedy of humanity. From the moment on where we scaled up more than 150 people, this is called the Dunbar number, right? We can't trust and remember people over 150. So if we want to scale as a civilization, we need to hire guys to save on communication and transaction coordination costs. And here's the tragedy. When you have a small group there and a bigger group there, Pac-Man, right? The bigger group always wins. The bigger nation wins from the smaller nation. The bigger company eats up the smaller company. This is the tragedy, because it means that the touchy-feely relationships you have in the small group cannot be scaled up. And guess what? By the way, I went to the Vatican in 2008, and my speech was called Peak Hierarchy. And the bishop there didn't sleep all night, so but I think you will sleep. So what is peak hierarchy? Well, today, think about Wikipedia. What is the average team in Wikipedia? And Wikipedia has completely displaced the commercial, hierarchical, proprietary encyclopedias. Or think about Linux, the alternative operating software, without which the NASA wouldn't operate, Facebook and Google wouldn't operate, and the internet would not exist. What's the average team in Linux? 4. 1 in Wikipedia, 4 in Linux. What does that mean? That means today we can scale small group dynamics. We can scale communal shareholding. So what I invite you to do is look at history as a succession of dominations of a particular allocation method. Gift economy, authority ranking, market pricing. So here's what I'm saying. We are moving towards a society that will be dominated by communal shareholding. The commons. This is the thesis of Jeremy Rifkin, right? What is he saying? And I agree with him. Today, you can see the world as a giant soccer match, right? You have teams, and they're cooperating within the team. But they're fighting with other teams, right? Competition is primary, but within the competition game, you have cooperation. So how does it change? Well, think about all the companies that work around Linux. Red Hat, IBM, all these companies. They're all co-producing, co-creating Linux. They're bound by their commons. They're codependent on their commons. That's where the key value is created for these companies. And then they compete in the marketplace. But this is a huge shift, because collaboration becomes primary and competition becomes a game within cooperation. So this is the shift that is happening today. And so peer-to-peer is a relational dynamic, I conclude my definition, where an individual is interacting with a whole. So it doesn't get anything back from a particular person. If you contribute to Linux, there's no person in Linux giving you something back. Give a brick, get a house. You can use the whole of Linux, right? Even actually if you don't contribute. So maybe we'll speak about that as well. So that's what peer-to-peer means, communal shareholding, creating a commons together. And then peer production is the system whereby peers contribute to the creation of shared resources, right? A commons is a shared resource which is managed by its user community. That's about the shortest definition that we can give of the commons. And so today what we see emerging everywhere is open knowledge communities, free software communities, and open design communities. So this is what we call peer production. And as you notice, these are so far immaterial projects, right? It's a production of things that are not rival. They're not material. So, in the 19th century, a man with a white beard, not unlike my friend Rasigan, but probably whiter. You probably know him. I won't pronounce his name. He said, communism is a system whereby everybody can contribute what he wants and everybody can use what he needs. So here we have it. We have the paradox today that we have a communist system, not a Soviet Union, not that kind of communism, right? According to the original definition, that is operating at the heart of the capitalist marketplace, in codependency with capitalism. Capitalism can no longer function without peer production, and peer production cannot yet function without capitalism. Now, I want to tell you a little analogy, because this is very important. Because if you're on the left, and I can really see this is a left-wing audience, because there's nobody sitting on the other side. If you see it from the left, this is a paradox, right? Well, peer production cannot be interesting because it's operating within capitalism. So, maybe it's just a new form of capitalism. But let's look at how societies really change. And there, the man with the white beard, I think, was really wrong. Because what he thought was that the workers produced by the capitalist system would take over, and then they would change everything, right? This is not how feudalism emerged, and this is not how capitalism emerged. What happened is the dominant system is in crisis. So Rome stops expanding. No more slaves, no more gold, no more agricultural imports. No more money to pay the legionnaires. More taxes for the free farmers. And a slow decline of the imperial system. When you live in such a system that's creating issues, you look for pragmatic solutions. So what does an enlightened slave owner do? He frees his slaves and makes them into serfs. Because then they can have their family, their kids, their village, their church. And it gets 50% of their produce instead of 100, but it doesn't have to pay 100 legionnaires. It makes sense, right? The Germans, when they came into Roman cities, they would tell the people, to the slaves, they would say, if you flee, we'll free you. If you flee, we'll free you, right? So all the people would because 90% of the people in Roman cities were slaves, they would just run away, and then the German tribes would get in. If you're a free farmer and you have to pay more and more taxes, you can't survive, so you ask a lord, can I join your serfs? So you see, managerial class and productive class, both at the same time, are looking for solutions. And by doing that, they are, at least in Europe, that's what happened, they're creating a new logic. And the logic of feudalism was very, very different from the logic of the Roman Empire. It was a different system. Same thing happened with the crisis of feudalism. The feudal lords who can't make money anymore in the old system with their serfs, they start looking for solutions. Merchants emerge, right? Or they start supporting merchants in the cities. The serfs are fleeing towards the cities where they become labor, right? So, follow me. Slaves to serfs, serfs to labor, slave owners to feudal owners to capitalist owners, right? This is the evolution. So what happens is at first within the old society, the new system has to emerge and gradually strengthen itself, right? And then the contradictions with the old dominant system at some point become intolerable. And that's when you have social revolution. This is the way it happened. So what's happening today? Well, think about Google. Think about Facebook. Think about YouTube. Think about Flickr. What does Google produce? Nothing. It helps us find each other's work. What does YouTube produce? Nothing. It helps each other find videos that we produced. Flickr, same for photographs, right? Facebook does not produce communication. They don't make movies. So this is a section of capitalist class that is investing in peer-to-peer systems, right? And it's a paradox. You can critique Facebook as much as you want, and I do, but here's what they're doing. They are enabling 2 billion people to engage in peer-to-peer relationships, to permissionally connect with each other, to self-organize and to create value. So this is a paradox. This is how social change really happens. And why are they doing this? Because there is no money to be made in production, right? 3% profit rates in production. They want 15%. And how much are they making with Facebook? 100%. Because they're not paying anybody, right? So Eben Moglen is the lawyer of the Free Software Foundation, says, free software is the wet dream of both capitalists and communists alike, right? It depends on your perspective. Because if you're a capital owner, wow, all these people working for free, right? Think about Uber. They're not investing in cars. They just enable people to find rides. Airbnb is not investing in hotel rooms. They enable people to find empty spaces, right? So this is called netarchical capitalism. Capital investing in a new mode of value creation. But what happens at the bottom? And okay, here I'm a European, so this is going to be a little bit Eurocentric, or at least Western-centric. In Europe, in the Western world, I don't like to use the developed world, because I'm a refugee of Western civilization. I live in Thailand, right? So in the Western world, only 7% of the people produce physical goods. That's it. There is no more working class, or well, there's a bit, right? So what is the fastest growing class in Western countries? It's called the precariat. Independent workers working on projects, not in the social security system. And what do these workers do? They are networked. They look for friends and sustenance and solidarity within their networks. And they are creating commons. So this is what is happening today. Of course, we're still in a capitalist society. Labor and capital still exist. But at the same time, we are moving to a new system where we have peer producers at the bottom and netarchical capitalists at the top. The managerial class and the productive class. This shift is happening today. Now, why can we still be optimistic about this? Well, there's a few really great things about peer production. One is it's hyper-productive. Think about patents. You probably learned that patents promote innovation. Well, there's no evidence for it. On the contrary, actually, there's an inverse relationship. There's a really great book about Germany and the UK showing that as soon as the UK adopted IP laws, the innovation slowed down, and Germany, which didn't do it, overtook them. But you look at steam engines, steep innovation curve, patenting flat, unpatenting steep. 3D printing, this is something I experienced personally. Steep innovation curve, patenting of 3D printing, unpatenting 10 years ago. Look at 3D printing today. The innovation only starts when you don't have patents. Patents hold back innovation, which is why universities are holding back innovation today, right? Because they're patenting everything. Which is why innovation is not happening in the universities anymore. It's happening in the peer production communities, believe me. So it's hyper-productive. So I talk about 3 revolutions in human productivity. Very short. The first invention is coercion, slavery, right? It's productive, more than a tribal society. You don't see temples and castles in tribal society. That productivity comes from the coercion. External negative motivation, right? I conquer you, I could kill you, but out of the goodness of my heart, you can work for the rest of your life. Yeah, for me, that's slavery. The serf condition is a bit better. you can work for me and I protect you, right? But capitalism is the second one, because they change from negative external motivation to positive external motivation. I do it for the money. And this was a great revolution in human productivity, right? Pharmaceuticals, karaoke bars, a lot of things that we didn't have before. In what sense is peer-to-peer a revolution? Well, think about the Wikipedia. How many people are coerced to work for Wikipedia? I haven't yet seen any article about slave camps where people have to write articles about Wikipedia. But what about money? Well, a bit for the CIA and stuff like that, a bit, and for Microsoft, But the overwhelming majority of Wikipedians is there because they want to be there. They are passionately producing. And passionate production is very productive. Ask any HR manager. This is what they want, that everybody is enthusiastic about work. Unfortunately, in a corporation, it's only 1 out of 5, right? So think about this, 1 out of 5 competing with 5 out of 5. Now, the other thing is more easy to understand. I'm a private company. I have money for 5 researchers. I'm going to compete against everybody else. Or I'm a company with money for 5 researchers, but I'm joining an open design community, right? Think about IBM. They pay 2,000 people, but they have access not only to the 20,000 people that are paid by other companies, but by the 25% of people working for free for Linux, right? So it's high. So if you are in the industrial sector and you choose that open road, forget about the proprietary strategy. It's dead. It's finished. Takes a while, but this is what is happening. Okay, but that's not exactly what excites me. So what excites me is the fact that it allows people to freely choose their meaningful activity. This is for me very important. How many people today in our society are able to freely choose their meaningful activity? Not many, right? And the second thing is the sharing aspect of it. In other words, any innovation produced by anyone in such a system is available instantly to anybody else in the world. So the Wikispeed car, okay, let me give that example. An industrial car changes every year, but the changes that you're buying this year were done 5 years ago. And 90% of innovations never appear in the car. Wikispeed, open design community, 80 people in 3 months, design a car that is 5 times as fuel efficient as any industrial car. In 3 months without capital. It can be produced in a local microfactory in 1 or 2 days using 3D printing machines. It's road ready, it's certified. It changes every week. Every week, if you buy a car, it's different from the week before. And it's sustainable because an open design community never designs for planned obsolescence. They design for social utility, right? So if we talk about sustainability, I'm sorry guys, but the private sector will never do it. They are designing for planned obsolescence. And this is dramatic. Another little statistic, and I didn't find it back, but I swear I read it. This was design students in Aalto, Finland, the biggest design university. 98% of them want to do sustainable design. Not the radicals, no. All of them, they know how the world is today. But what's happening? If they find a job, they have to design for planned obsolescence, right? So the only thing, if you mean it as a young person and you want to do sustainable design, you go to a peer production community. Right? And then you try to create your entrepreneurship around that open design community, which is designed sustainably. Because companies are not doing it. Okay. So the post-capitalist aspect is, I can explain it as follows. In a classical labor system, private labor paid with a salary creates a commodity that's sold on the market. In the peer-to-peer system, contributors freely contribute to a common good. So it's not labor, and it's not a commodity, and they're not creating a commodity, they're creating a commons, right? But around the commons you have a market. It's not difficult to explain. The commons itself is an abundant digital good today. So you can't sell Linux because you push a button on internet and you have a Linux copy, right? So it's a decommodification, right? It's no longer a commodity. But around Linux, well, if you want to adapt Linux to your needs, you have to pay labor to do Linux. If you want somebody to install it, to maintain it, to insure it, to teach it, you need to pay. So around the commons, you can have vibrant market arising. And I want to explain a bit. So this is the old way, right? This is the way that's dominant today. Private labor, corporations capture the value, pay labor. In a market relation, we do not look at externalities. That's somebody else's problem. So we need the state to regulate it from the outside. And civil society, forget about it. It's what you do when you come home tired. Non-profit, non-governmental. It's derivative. But the new system is the following. So this is the institutional logic of peer production. We are creating a new way of creating and distributing value. This is how it works. This is not how it should work. This is how it really works mostly today. At the core, you have a contributory community. Contributors contributing to the commons. Open design communities, open knowledge communities, open software communities. Around that commons, you have entrepreneurial coalitions. Companies creating market value on top of their commons. So here's a problem, right? Here's a problem. So even though the core value is created, the social utility value is created in the commons, the market value is captured by private companies. So we have an accumulation of the commons, open input, participatory process, commons-oriented output. At the same time, we have an accumulation of capital. And this is a problem. I call it the value crisis. Here's the reality today. More and more people are able and enabled to directly create social utility. And this is rising exponentially. There's different figures from Linux code. It's exponential. The monetization of this is only growing linearly. And it's captured by this netarchical class. And when you look at Facebook, you can see the problem. 100% exploitation. Social utility is great. Thank you, Facebook, for investing in our peer-to-peer systems, right? That's great. But the market value, we're not getting anything back. So if you're wondering why we have so much precarity, this is one of the basic reasons. Less and less labor is actually paid for. Ask any artist or journalist what's happening in their field. They're getting paid today less than they were paid 30 years ago. Right? And they're working with contracts, and they have to change all the time. And between contracts, they don't have social security, etc., etc. So this is a problem, not just for the precarious people. It's a problem for capital, because if nobody gets a salary, who can pay the product, right? So we have also a crisis of capital accumulation. So one of the things we do with the P2P Foundation is think about how to make peer production more autonomous. Because today, peer production cannot reproduce itself, right? You need to work for capital in order to continue to contribute to these commons. So how could this look like? And this is the slide here. So we need to do, first of all, here's what's happening. Civil society has become productive. The second thing that we need to do is we need to change the kind of market that is operating around the commons. We need an ethical economy, economic players who recognize externalities. So, and then the third one, the third institution that I didn't mention yet is the for-benefit association. So if you look at open design communities, they have a community, entrepreneurs, but they also have foundations. The Wikimedia Foundation, the Linux Foundation. What are they doing? They're not commanding the production, like in an enterprise. What they are doing is creating the conditions, the infrastructure of cooperation that allows people to continue to do this over time, right? Wikimedia Foundation fundraisers to pay for the servers. Things like that. So this is also a new view of the world and how the world could operate today. So I see peer production as an emerging prototype of a new mode of production that is more productive than capitalism, that integrates externalities so it's sustainable and more socially just. But we need to do a few things to be there. And again, this is very similar to the past. At the late 18th century, we had something called a putting out system. So this meant that the merchants would sell raw material and machines to the crafts workers. And then they would buy their produce. So what it means is that at that moment in time, capitalism was not able to reproduce itself without using the old regime, right? It was using the crafts and the guilds. So they had to destroy the guilds, and they had to do the enclosures, chase the peasants away from their land. Once that was done, capitalism could become a full economic system with labor itself as a commodity, right? So then it starts working. So peer production, if it wants to wean itself from this codependency, this is what we have to do. It's very simple. If you're a peer producer, you create your own economic entity, right? As a co-op. And therefore, the surplus value that you generate goes back into your own self-reproduction and your ability to produce for the commons. Once we have that, we would have an autonomous peer production system, just as capitalism did that. And so what you see here, that the key things that need to be done are not yet political. They're actual economic interventions that we need to do. So this is work within the productive communities. Okay, this is class struggle 3.0 or 5.0, I don't know. So this is the politics of peer-to-peer. This is how there is being expressed today, by changing politics. So you have a cross here. The vertical axis is global versus local control. And the horizontal axis says for-profit versus for-benefit orientation. All right? So 4 quadrants. Centralized control of peer-to-peer infrastructures. And Facebook enables peer-to-peer, but you don't control the design, you don't own the platform, you don't own your personal data. It's all hierarchical. Peer-to-peer front-end, hierarchical back-end. Google, all of that. Netargo cap. The second one is, at the bottom, is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a bit more interesting. Bitcoin is sometimes called a peer-to-peer currency. And it is in some way, but it's the particulars that are important. The peer-to-peer aspect of Bitcoin, a currency that is created by computers autonomously, is located in the computer, not in the people. Some people have 10,000 computers. A farmer in Uttar Pradesh probably has no computer, right? And it's designed to rise in value. So you make them easy in the beginning and more difficult. So the demand rises faster than the supply, so the price goes up. So Bitcoin has a rent extraction mechanism, making money with money. Why? Because it's an anarcho-capitalist design. It's a right-wing libertarian design. It's an Austrian economics design, right? So technology is never neutral. It's also not whatever people do with it. No, it's actually the design itself, right? There is a social struggle in the design of technology. It's embedded in the technology. So if you use Bitcoin, which is fine for me, I welcome them, because I'm actually doing fundraising with Bitcoin. But you have to know that this is not a commons-oriented currency. I'm sorry. It doesn't function that way. But what is happening at the same time is what's happening on the right side. which, first of all, we have an emergence of local resilience initiatives. Exponential rise. 48% more communitarian urban agricultural in the US in just 2 years. Co-working spaces from 3 to 50 in Barcelona in 3 years. Time banks in Catalonia from 8 to 400 in 3 years. Hacker spaces from 1 to 15 in 3 years in Vienna, etc., etc. Wherever you look, and this has to do with peer-to-peer technology. Why are there so many complementary currencies today? Because it's easy to manage. Why is bike sharing so popular? Because it's easy to manage. They couldn't deal with stolen bikes until 10 years ago. Now they can, right? So this is peer-to-peer technology that is used for local development, redoing the food supply chain. In Europe, it's unbelievable. In every city, you'll find hundreds of collective buying groups and all kinds of things. Cooperative energy. Germany, 60% of renewable energy is in the hands of consumer co-ops. Same in the Netherlands. It's not done by the state, it's not done by the corporation, it's done by the people, bottom up, right? So this is one thing. What is missing probably today is global companies. I'll return on that. So this is something I want to explain later on. So these are choices that we can make, right? So here's my critique. Okay, neoliberal capitalism, the problem is the value doesn't flow back. The problem of Bitcoin is it makes little capitalists out of everyone. That's the value. That's what Uber and Airbnb. Think about, we used to have couchsurfing, right? Couchsurfing was, I have an empty room, I can exchange with someone, we don't pay anything. Airbnb is, oh, if you invite my friend next weekend, I cannot rent it. Right? They're commodifying more things that were not commodified before, right? So of course, I'm for the things on the other side, which is how can we as a community make sure that we have good food? How can we organize the supply chain? And here I want to make a little argument, which is very important to understand. The commons is not about just immaterial things, right? So if you produce something, you need machines, you need raw material, you need a space. But everything you do has a knowledge representation, right? Supply chain information, accounting, right? So how does that change when you have commons? Let me explain how it works, and this is already working. At the core, we have the commons. Around you have the entrepreneurial coalition. They are producing physically. But they are all working with the same open license. They may have a social charter. Therefore, they are in solidarity with their commons. Therefore, it's more easy for them to apply open supply chains and open logistics. Therefore, they're not planning and they're not pricing. They're mutually coordinating their production. I'm not saying this is happening on a big scale, but I'll give you just an example. N-Spiral. Coalition of 50 social entrepreneurs in New Zealand, operating in full transparency around their commons, which is Lumio, an open source decision-making software. They're already doing it. Curto Café, favorite story for Irma. Curto Café, executive from a coffee company in Brazil 15 years ago. He quits his corporate job because he can't get good coffee. Yeah, A, B, C, D, 4 categories, A and B go to the West. They make beautiful coffee, but they can't drink it because it's exported. And the people who make the coffee are hyper-exploited. They're the poorest of the poor. So we Westerners, we drink expensive coffee, but the person actually doing the work is not getting anything from it, right? So, you could do fair trade. Please do. But this is different. Curto Café is different. So here's what they do. They decided to open up their supply chain and to do open book accounting. So no certification, just see what we do. Here's where we get the coffee, here's how much we pay for it. Open research, a coffee commons. The blends are online. You can try them, you can improve them, and so they have a collective learning community around creating good coffee. Crowd-funded retail expansion. You want good coffee? Here's a crowdfunding campaign to pay the rent in a shopping mall in Rio. You invest, you get free coffee for 2 years. Yeah? And then they hacked the coffee machines, which is illegal. But they did it anyway, so that they can change the little pots themselves and not pay very expensive pots. So you see, this is a whole new way of thinking. This is not about, I'm going to pay people, pay them as low as I can to sell the coffee as much as I can, and I may become rich with it. No. This is how can I make good coffee without exploiting people. So the social goal, the social utility is primary, and profit is subsumed under that goal. If they make profit, it's reinvested in the goal of making good coffee, right? This is the model that we see there on the right. Okay. Maybe I can talk really, really long, but I want to say a bit also, I'm still into politics. So if you remember the value crisis, right? So what is that saying? What it's saying is that the system that is dominant today is not a good fit environment for the further emergence of an autonomous, socially just, sustainable pre-production system. It doesn't work really well together. So last year, in 2014, we spent 6 months in Ecuador under a contract with 3 governmental institutions. And what we produced there is the first ever integrated commons transition plan. How do we get to a society where this can emerge? And why would Ecuador want that? And I'm not sure what the situation is in South Africa, but here's the situation in Ecuador. It's an extractive economy. Not gold, but oil and agricultural products. They have barely any industry. So they have to buy expensive, value-added consumer and production goods from the West, right? So unequal terms of trade. They will never be able to develop that way. They will always be dependent. So the question was, can we change from a dependency on finite material goods to an economy based on infinite immaterial goods? Can we organize our economy around knowledge commons in every domain of industrial activity? That was the idea. So here, very quickly, how we did this. So there was a whole participatory process, but I'm not going to explain it. We did 24 workshops in the provinces. We spoke to 70 civil society organizations. We had an open source software where the people could, for 3 months, produce amendments. We had a summit with the state, local civic groups, and foreign invitees. So it was a whole process to produce it. Okay, here's the idea. How do we do this? If you want open science, you need a feeding mechanism, right? So we looked at feeding mechanisms. What's the feeding mechanism for open science? It's open access publishing, right? I'm not an academic anymore. If I want to read an academic article, I have to pay 40 euro per article. Forget about it. I can't pay. So as far as I'm concerned, science is not open, right? As far as a poor Ecuadorian indigenous student is concerned, science is not open. He doesn't have access. So if you want to have a commons, you need access. Second thing, the material infrastructures, right? So in science, this would be switching from proprietary scientific instruments to open hardware-based scientific instruments. There's a book about it called Open Source Lab. You can do it probably for 90% of standard scientific instruments. How much do you save? 80% of your investment. So if a country like South Africa would do this systematically, you can have 4 times more students producing science for the same investment, right? I always use this as an example. This is, and it also gives me an occasion to drink a little bit. This is a standard industrial product. Okay, what can we say about this?
Don't put it on
Oh yes, it's a bomb. It's a bomb. Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, we can say it's a brilliant piece of capitalist engineering, right? Okay, we know that the market is a scarcity allocation engine, but capitalism is a scarcity engineering engine, right? Put scarcity where there's none. Water is abundant. They succeeded in making it into a commodity. But anyway, that's the first thing to say about it. And fear, yes. Yeah. Okay, so this is, if you buy this, do you know that you pay, according to different calculations, Margaret Kennedy says 48%, Bernalita says 38%. Everything we buy today has 38 to 48% debt. Everything, right? Everything. Almost half of what you buy is debt servicing because the banks are creating the money for interest. It doesn't have to be that way. You can create interest-free money. You can even create negative interest money. All high civilizations had negative interest money. If you want to know why Europe tripled its production and population from the 10th to the 13th century, negative interest money. If you want to know why it collapsed in the 14th century, royal positive interest money, right? So why are, okay, this is one thing. Second thing, okay, what's the second thing? Oh yes, the price differential between open and closed, right? 1/8 of the cost of scientific hardware. If you make open scientific hardware, it's 1/8 of the cost. The third one, now I remember. There's a study, when you look at material and energy cost of production today, amazing but true, 3/4 is transportation. 3/4, right? So, can we do this differently? Yes. What we do is the following. We do the following. We say, what is light is global, and what is heavy is local. So we have a global open design community. Let's say that the farmers here in South Africa would produce their own agricultural machines. Combining global open design communities like FarmHack, Slow Tools Project, the Open Tech Collaborative, and the Atelier Paysan community in France. Thousands of machines are already available. Not from the state, not from big business. Made by other farmers. So this is the idea. The idea is you collaborate immaterially, globally. You learn from each other, farmer to farmer, right? Worker to worker, consumer to consumer, car engineer to car engineer. All these innovations are instantly available throughout the network. Then you build a micro factory and you produce on demand. No mass marketing, no mass production, no planned obsolescence, right? So this is the potential of this technology. If you combine distributed knowledge with distributed manufacturing, we can completely rethink how we produce, right? So the surplus value doesn't have to leak out to the West. But it's also, as a Westerner, I'm also selfish in this, right? Because what happened to the West? Remember, 1968, revolution. Young middle-class kids rebel against hierarchy, but also 10 million workers in France were on strike, and the president fled to Germany. What was the compromise? We'll give rock and roll to the kids, and we'll stop industry in the West, right? Because the Western workers no longer wanted to work in the Fordist system. What it means for the West, unfortunately, is that the surplus value is now produced in the global South, and the financial class captures it. And as you know, the welfare state is very rapidly disbanding in Europe. Look at Greece, look at Spain, look at Italy, look at everywhere. It's everywhere, right? So if we would do this, relocalize production using this new model, we could reindustrialize Europe, and we could reindustrialize the whole world with the surplus value staying where it has been created. and being reinvested locally in the local economy. I think this is a huge potential. But there is, and this is politics, there is a more important reason why the commons is so important. If you look at political power, all the achievements of the Western social system is the power of labor, right? And allies, but essentially the organized workers. When you no longer have organized workers, you no longer have a welfare state. So is there a way to get over that? And I'm saying yes. This is the politics. The commons should be the glue, right? We have digital cultural parties, like in Iceland. Where is our Icelandic colleague? Hey, Brita Jonsdottir, right? Okay, okay, yes. She apparently they have 27% of voting intentions, right? And the Pirate Party is a direct result from digital culture. But think about Syriza and Podemos, and especially the Barcelona coalition, En Comú, in common, right? 2011, mass mobilizations against neoliberalism, Occupy, Indignados, Syntagma Square. But they were anti-political. So no unions, no parties, we don't want, okay, fine. Then they stay home and the right wing wins the elections. And then it's 10 times worse than before. Those people went back to their neighborhoods and started organizing. These are the people who won the elections in Barcelona, right? They repoliticized. Syriza, Syntagma Square, the solidarity movements after the crisis. So these are new parties. There's not social democratic like it used to be, have been culturalized and socialized by the peer production of politics. Because this is what Occupy was. If you look at the functioning of how they organize themselves, this was peer production. I cannot explain it now, but believe me, this was the same way as an open source community. Very similar. So what I'm saying is that we have a demographic majority and a potential political majority if we start looking at politics with the glue of the commons. Digital cultural parties, the new radical transformative left parties, maybe even progressive social liberal, social entrepreneurial parties, like Alternativet in Denmark. We can do it. And I think Barcelona actually shows that this is a real possibility, that it can happen. Okay, so what does the P2P Foundation do? And now I'm closing, and if you're tired of my speaking, you have to do something, because I can go on for a long time. I usually have to be dragged. Okay. So this is what we do in the P2P Foundation. I consider P2P Foundation as a collective intellectual for the new commons movement, right? Think about Gramsci. And so how can we build counter-hegemonic power based on the new social forces that are emerging through peer production? Because labor is declining, but precarity is increasing, and the precarious class is a commons class, is a commons producing class. Okay, here we go. So, what are the three main systemic responses to the capitalist crisis? They are, first, sustainability. People are everywhere in the world trying to produce differently. The circular economy, the blue economy, the cradle to cradle, right? All these things. People want sustainable production. The second big reaction is the solidarity economy. Social justice in the reward system, in the distribution of value, right? In Brazil, a few million workers are in the solidarity economy. In every Western country, 10-15% of the economy is in the hands of cooperative, social, solidarity economic models. Okay, this is the second form. The third form is the sharing economy, mutualizing of knowledge, the open source movements, mutualizing of infrastructure, the sharing economy, collaborative economy movements. So here's the problem. People are doing it, but it's fragmented. Some people do food, some people do energy, and they don't talk to each other. That's the first problem, right? Now, the answer to that is to create ecosystemic networks. It's happening. I went to Catalonia. I think I told that in a few workshops. It's happening. You go to Catalonia, they have the eco-jarjas, economic networks. You go in any city in Catalonia, people have healthy organic food. Every Friday they know where to go. They have textiles. It's a system. It's already an ecosystem. It's not just people doing stuff on their own. In Madison, Wisconsin, where I was a few months ago, they have the mutual aid network. Stephanie Rearick is looking at the time bank, which is working very well there, the credit union, the food co-op. Why are they not working together? Why cannot I use my time bank dollars for my mortgage in the credit union? Right? Ecosystemic thinking. In Lille, in northern France, encommun.org, they are mapping common good producing institutions, their material and immaterial commons, and the value streams between them. So this is something we need to do. We need to start thinking ecosystemically, that these alternative value streams start reinforcing each other, right? Okay. The next thing we need to do is create bridges between those three responses. So the things we are working on is here, for example, the notion of open cooperativism. I love cooperatives, but it doesn't go far enough. Because what are they doing? They're working for their own members. They have to compete in the marketplace. After a while, they change, right? And they're not producing commons. Mondragon is not producing common goods. We need co-ops that co-produce commons with the contributory communities, right? And this is what I call open co-ops. Now, to do this, I think we need a new type of licensing. Now, let me tell you a little bit about licensing. It's very important. This is the glue that holds peer production together. It's a social contract. Remember, in the Middle Ages, cities had charters, freedom charters, like the Magna Carta and stuff like that, right? So this is what binds the city together against the danger of the feudal lord, right? And he has to respect it. He signed a contract. An open license like the copyleft, it's a contract. What it says is everybody can use our commons, but if you use it, you have to contribute it back to the commons. It's a social contract. It binds the community together. If you don't accept it, you go do it somewhere else. Now, we have a little problem here. And this is very controversial within the free software community, so you're warned. So here's the paradox. The more communistic the license, the more capitalistic the practice. Why is that so? Well, the rule is if you say everybody can use it, then IBM can use it. And IBM is an elephant in the room, right? So it's going to dominate your economy. And almost all free software economies are dominated by these type of companies. Okay, if you don't mind it, it's no problem. I mind. So we need a solution. So what we need is socialist licenses. Okay. Remember the 19th century, what was the rule? The socialist rule was from anyone his contribution to anyone according to his contribution. Right? So here we have reciprocity built in. Right? So communism can work in the immaterial sphere. It's abundant. But when you're in the rival sphere, in the material sphere, it's not abundant yet. Maybe it will one day, who knows. So you can't work on the same principle. So if you want to do peer production physically, you need a reciprocity-based license. And we call it copy fair. I think this will be very useful for example, indigenous communities who want to protect their seed knowledge. Because if they share it, okay, yes, the company will give back the knowledge, but there's no economy because they will sell it, right? So the rule in the copy fair license says, if you don't contribute, you got to pay. But what is more important than the money is to reintegrate the principle of reciprocity in the marketplace. Because what is the tragedy of this system? It's that we have externalized all the social environmental costs. This is the basis of the liberal philosophy. And the copyleft is a liberal license. It's a liberal communist license because it cares about the rights. It doesn't care about the conditions in which the rights can be exercised. So if we want an emancipatory politics, we need a moral license that requires reciprocity, and we need a moral marketplace, like in the Middle Ages, in the free cities in the Middle Ages. The city officials would buy the grain and would impose a price. If they didn't, there would be a riot. They didn't like that, right? So it was no true pricing. It was called just pricing. Of course, it was socially ranked, but it was still, there was a value in the price, a moral value. And so the idea of an ethical entrepreneurial coalition is to, through these social charters and the copy fair license, to reintegrate fairness in the marketplace around the commons. Okay, then here we work on something we call the open source circular economy. Again, I repeat, only open design communities can create sustainable designs. But what about circular economy itself? How can you expect to have a circular economy with secret supply chains? Can't do it. You have to share, right? So you need open supply chains. And you need open book accounting. So if we really want sustainable production, there is no other choice than to merge and converge the sustainable and the open model. And if you want a socially just economy, we need to do both. The solidarity economy model needs to converge with the open models. Now here's the problem, and you can't see it. It's at the bottom. Where's the money? There isn't. That's a big problem. Now, it's normal to expect that a venture capital company is not going to invest in Wikispeed because there's no super profit to be made without patents. What is more serious, and this is a call to, if you're from ethical finance, cooperative finance, is that even if you go to let's say, Triodos, ethical finance, and they support cooperative enterprise, and then Wikispeed goes there, and you know what they ask? Where are your patents? As collateral. Well, we don't want any patents. You don't get any money. So here we have a serious problem. So one of our projects is an open cooperative development agency. So we need to find money, resources that can invest in production that is and open and sustainable and cooperative, right? Otherwise you get Whole Foods. Very good organic food produced by slave labor in Mexico, right? You need the three at the same time. Otherwise, they always will cheat. They have to. It's a system. They're not bad people. It's just how it works. So I hope you start to understand that we try to invent interventions. And the aim is very clear, to make peer production autonomous, to go from a codependency to a more self-sustaining system. We also need to reconstitute politics, and this is what you see at the upper level. So first 2 realistic things and then 2 science fiction proposals. Okay, the realistic things were science fiction when I proposed it 3 years ago, and now it's reality. So the Assembly of the Commons is my proposal to reconstitute a politics around the commons. In the places where you live, unite the citizens that are contributing and defending common goods. Let them meet, let them have a forum, let them have festivals, and let them devise proposals towards the political world. This is what we want and we need in order to defend and grow common goods. Assembly of the Commons. The Chamber of the Commons. Same thing. All the ethical entrepreneurs co-creating commons. Join together. Because it's not the Chamber of Commerce that's going to do it for you. On the contrary. So we need a voice for the citizens, and we need a voice for entrepreneurs who are creating livelihoods around the commons. And these forces, in my imagination, will slowly recreate a value system and a new politics, reconstitute social power around the commons. Now, the Assembly of the Commons is going to be done in Ghent in Belgium. in Lille. And, okay, that's enough already. Oh, at the European Union level. We're going to have an Assembly of the Commons at the level of the European Union next year. The Chamber of the Commons is being prepared in Chicago. So these ideas are slowly, okay, it's still one or two, but it's starting. Then here, let's dream. Global governance, what can we do? Okay, the first one I call United Transnational Republics. Why do we need this? Well, what is the P2P Foundation? The P2P Foundation, we're based in the Netherlands, but there's one person there. We're not Dutch. It's because we trust the Dutch governance system, that's all, right? But we're global. We're a network. We are everywhere, or we want to be everywhere, right? So we're globally born. We operate globally. You cannot see us as a national thing, right? But the United Nations consists of nations, right? So the United Transnational Republics, the idea is that civic movements like ours would unite at a global level. Yeah? Not for today, but we're working on it. Okay, then you have the proposal of files, which is Greek for clan. Okay, this really comes from a science fiction book. The Diamond Age. We're a cult, by the way, and our Bible is a Diamond Age. No, I'm joking, but the Diamond Age is very important. So Diamond Age is a book by Neil Stephenson where he described 15 years ago how a globally networked world would look like. The nation states have withered, they still exist, but they have lost their power. Multinationals dominate the world. But at the civic level, you have global networks. The Hindu network, the Chinese network, the Neo-Victorian network, the Neo-Hippie network, right? And so people in this world, they go to school of their network. They get social security from their network. Now, this is not happening. So the idea of a file is to create business ecosystems around communities and their commons. They already exist, but not in the P2P sense. Let me give you two examples. I told them yesterday, right? In Europe, I don't know here, but in Europe and the United States, you'll find them. In every city with more than 40,000 people, you will find indigenous people from Ecuador playing the pan flute, New Age music, and selling llama wool. You've seen them, right? Do you know this is a worldwide system? These people are organized. It's 1/3 of GDP of the Otavalo province in Ecuador. It's a file. They exist. Another example, very dark guys selling fake Prada bags everywhere on the beaches in Europe. They're Wolof from Senegal, Sufi brotherhoods. They're organized on a global scale. It's probably the same. I was told they cannot get married if they haven't done this, right? So every 6 months they change. So, but this is not a business. It's not a business. It's a business ecosystem to create an income and a livelihood for this fraternity, for this indigenous tribe in Ecuador. You see what I mean? So what we need is that, okay, imagine this. Wikispeed, global open design community creating these cars. Microfactories producing the cars on demand through open co-ops. But all these open co-ops are organized on a global scale. Why do we need to do this? Because we need to build global counterpower. Yeah? We have multinationals. You know the word that is used most by Mark Zuckerberg? This is from the book from his old PR lady. Domination. He uses it several times a day. So Facebook, Google, that's the game they're playing. They think in 10 years' time, they will rule the world. And they can, because they have our data, right? You know what they're doing on Facebook? They are neuro-linguistically programming you. They have a direct link between your head and your hand. They know everything. 700 pages on every individual on average. They know more about you than you do, right? So IBM is collecting enormous amount of data like this, and actually selling it to Facebook and stuff. So we need to build counterpower, and the NGOs, it's not the same. We need also expressions of peer production to be present at the global level. At the economic level, the files, and at the civic level, what I call the transnational republics. So, yeah, this is our plan. This is our master plan. Normally it's secret, it's the Illuminati thing, but here it's a privileged audience. So I just want to say, this is not all for my thumb drive. It's because we observe productive communities globally. And I travel and I talk to people and I look at their innovations. For example, what I didn't talk to you about was contributory accounting. What is it? If you contribute collectively to a commons, say 30 people, and then 2 people go on the market, it's not fair, right? So contributory accounting means that you are taking note of the contributions of everyone. You're not necessarily paying them if you don't have money, so you continue your passionate production. But if there is a material gain at the end, it has to be fair. So we have a translation collective that works with us. It's called Guerrilla Translation. Everything they do pro bono is in their pro bono accounting. When they do market translations, they send 15% of their income to the pro bono accounting. Sensorica, a open hardware scientific community, have a very sophisticated contributory accounting system. They call it open value accounting, right? So this is the world tomorrow being built today. And I'm just conclude with a little image to make that clear to you. You see, I can never end. It's like I always find something else to say. Okay, so think about 15th century Europe, more or less. You know that Christians could not lend money. They would go straight to hell. It's in the Bible. I didn't say it. Not usury, interest, right? So here are the Italian cities, and they need money. And there's not enough Jewish bankers yet. So they need more money. Where they can find it? Well, they invent purgatory, right? No trace of purgatory before the 11th century. So purgatory is an ideological technique that allows Christians to lend money, and then they go to purgatory, but they can buy indulgences, right? And indulgences go to the church and build the Gothic cathedrals. It's a brilliant system. Anyway, that's the first example. The second one, the Templars, right? The Templars protect the pilgrims who go to the Holy Land. And they deal with money. So they reinvent or invent, I'm not sure, double book accounting. Double book accounting, imagine this, you're a supervisor in a feudal land and your lord is fighting in Israel, or whatever it was called then, Palestine. So when he comes back, you don't want to mess up. So you start using double book accounting. But double book accounting carries a wholly different vision of the world, right? Because the feudal lord, he gets the stuff, he parties, he does his games, his war games. There's no question of accounting. So once people start using accounting, they start looking at the world differently, right? Okay, the third thing, Calvin. Before, if you were rich, you're bad. Now, suddenly, if you're rich, it's because you're elected. So all these interventions appear in these centuries, right? And they appear at different stages, at different moments. You don't know what they mean yet. You just know, oh, the world is changing. The printing press, right? What about the 18th century? In the 18th century, all these patterns have found each other. And they are capitalism. And that's what we're doing today. Crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, distributed manufacturing. We are peer-to-peering everything. And all these patterns are finding themselves in peer production. Okay, thank you. You can jump on a table, Irma, here if you want to.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm a very proud Belgian now. No, very, very, very innovative, very interesting, and very powerful. Thank you very much, Michel. When you started talking, I noticed that I actually forgot the most important part of my introduction to you, and that I forgot the P2P, and to introduce you as the founder of the P2P Foundation. So sorry for that, but I probably was too excited to hear your speech and thought, let me forget half of it so we can go to his presentation. Thank you very much. No, it was very powerful, and now I do understand the web statistics, because they say that your blog, your P2P website, has more than 7 million readers.
It's 28 million, actually.
28 million, sorry. I didn't do my homework too good. But according to Topsy, a social search and analytics company, Michel's blog...
7 million on Twitter and 28 views on the wiki. That's...
Okay, yeah. Blog is in the top 3 of retweeted blogs. Yeah, top 3% of retweeted blogs.
It's no longer the case, but okay.
Okay, and another stats we found here is that Twitter feeds, your Twitter feeds are considered to be in the top 10 in global influence and business innovation and political economy influence.
I didn't know that.
So,
okay,
so something new. So, you know, and how powerful it was, and now I really understand these statistics. Well, I'll open up the floor for questions. I'm sure there's a lot of thought, a lot of comments, a lot of questions here. So we start with you, sir.
Steal the microphone for the question. I'm sorry.
It works.
It doesn't get.
No, it's for the recording. Yeah, it's for the recording.
So who's the first?
Thank you very much, Michel. Michael Kahn is my name. A beautiful talk. You spoke about putting out. And the West is certainly putting out to China. So where does China fit into your thinking in terms of peer-to-peer? Thank you.
Well, that's interesting. Well, okay, so one of the things to say is that, of course, the social atmosphere is very different in East Asia now than it is in Europe and the United States. In Europe and the United States, the social contract is negative. If you're a young person today, you know, it's very simple. You'll pay more and more for your studies, and you have less and less chance to have a job. Forget about a house, forget about your pension. This is in a nutshell what young people expect today. The employment rates are very high. 48% in Greece, 38% in Spain. In Italy, I think I told you that young people now stay until 42 with their parents because they can't afford to pay their rent. I have that with my kids. I have 2 kids in Paris. The choice is very simple. If they pay rent, they can't do anything else. So they rather stay with with my ex-wife because then they can go travel, they can buy a CD, they can buy a book. Anyway, but this is the reality for young people today, right? So if you don't have hope, you have to find something else. So this is why, for example, in Catalonia, there is a massive shift to these models. That's probably the strong, but Greece is a bit different. But in any European country, you will find this. And they use the open licenses, and they have the culture, etc., etc. In China, it's a bit different, but think about what's called the Shanzai system. The Shanzai system is 40% or 48% of the mobile phones that you buy are Shanzai phones. These are phones that have been reverse engineered and that are shared in entrepreneurial commons. Now, they don't use open licenses, and it's for the money, but they do use that method. And it's a very productive, very competitive method, because some of these phones are actually better than the iPhone. A lot of them are not, but there are some of them. And it's the same system. They collectively innovate and share, you know, their designs in these entrepreneurial communities. It's a bit different, right? And the social contract in China is still positive, right? So if you ask French people, 70% of French people say they don't like capitalism, even on the right. Even in the US, there was a one, with the majority of young people said they preferred socialism over capitalism. Amazing. They quickly forgot about that particular one. They put it aside. But in China, 90% of the people are for capitalism. Even, the guy who works 16 hours a day, because he has hope in the future. So there's a different. Now, this is not the case. Like, for example, in Rio de Janeiro, for me was like amazing, because in Europe, if you talk to young people, they will say, "I do Linux, I like open source." In Rio, I met so many people. You know what they told me? I am peer-to-peer. And I met every day people who quit their jobs, well-paid jobs, to go in this alternative economy. And I visited peer-to-peer communities at every level of society. I went to the favelas, lower middle class, upper middle class, even the 1%. So it's not just a Western phenomenon. But it's probably an urban phenomenon, probably at this stage. But there are interconnections. Yeah. Yes. So just my thinking is, if you look at the past transitions, think about capitalism. It didn't start in Spain and Portugal, but in the Netherlands and UK, which were marginal at the periphery of the late feudal system. So I think that peer-to-peer is starting in the West because it has the largest knowledge class, right? But if you have Volkswagen and Audi and stuff, you're probably less motivated as a society to go in that direction. So I'm waiting for people in Malaysia and China to wake up and say, wow, we can make our own cars. The design's already, we don't need engineers because the design's already worked on. So this is not yet happening as far as I know, but I think we can expect it to happen in the next few years. There's already one open source car, the Tabi, which is invested by Chinese and Italian families. So this is the first example I know of actually something like that happening. Okay, sorry. Yeah, and she also...
First of all, Michel, époustouflant.
Merci.
I don't know, I don't think you can translate it in English, is it?
It blows me away.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Two is that one of the main incredible thing is the gift part of it. So we are from an organization called Magic, you know that? And I think you have practiced something above magic, which is alchemy. Because you have transformed, for example, a few ideas that we all know into something that was golden ideas or something like that. So the gift we're going to give you today is the word license that you have used. We have already transformed the license word into the word franchise. Friend.
Franchise.
A franchise. So you've got franchiser
Yes, that's
and
good. Very good.
franchisee. Because the
Fantastic.
relationship between the two, they are peer to peer.
Yes.
So we are giving you, normally they give you a gift,
No,
like
but
a book or something.
This is a wonderful concept, a new concept.
We're going to give you that word franchise. Okay. You don't have to pay. Okay, it's for free.
It's for free. It's perfect.
No, it's fantastic.
I'm going to use it. No, there is something called solidarity franchising, but it's a really ugly word.
Yeah.
So I'm going to suggest to them to use franchising.
I just wanted to give
Very
you
clever.
that gift because it's fantastic.
Very clever. Now, so just a little thing. I was in Geneva last month, and there was also a French-speaking guy, and he said, oh, these capitalists, they're capitalists. So I've been using that word too. Capitalist, to capt, right? Facebook is a capitalist. Yeah, okay. Maybe it doesn't work in English. It works in French though. Okay, please.
Thank you very much for your talk. It was absolutely fascinating. My name is Samantha Durham, and I'm the administrator and a spokesperson for the community exchange system in South Africa. This is
Great.
the world's largest online alternative
It's
currency
world famous
or
in my
complementary
world, yeah.
currency. I think very high penetration in Spain, and I think a lot of the examples you spoke of would be using this, and there's time banking and whatever. But a question that comes up a lot with the people I'm speaking to, and sort of convincing people how we can start transitioning from the currency that we're using today, the global currency, and especially in South Africa where we're we're so conservative, and change is very scary. How do we move from, well, obviously it's very easy to transition into alternative or complementary currencies using time. So a person's labor, home care or a carpenter or stuff like that, to the realistic notion that we still want to have laptops and cell phones and cars. And I'm trying to think how would you use peer-to-peer for extraction of resources, and if we're going to still be improving our technology, so your SRK, or the Large Hadron Particle Collider, and your large scientific projects, and mining, so, you know, do we still want energy and electricity and all the cables and the resources that we use for the lifestyles that we want to continue with? How do we transition from what we have today to a peer-to-peer version or a complementary currency, alternative currency, where we're still getting that energy and those resources that we need? And is that maybe what your open cooperative development agency would be for?
Yes, so here's the idea. So, you know, I see it as a stack, right? So today we're wasting resources, we're externalizing waste, and et cetera, et cetera. In the open source model, it starts from the beginning. The design itself is already sustainable. Now, on top of that, you put an open source circular economy because you have open supply chains and open book accounting. On top of that, you can apply shared mutual resources, physical resources. One shared car replaces 24 individual cars. So this is the idea that if we use an open source stack, and at the end of it, and of course I'm not a scientist in that sense, I couldn't calculate it, but I'm convinced that we can have maybe 80% of the current level of material distribution with 20% of the material and energy cost. It can be done. So otherwise, you know, we're all going to be like at the end of the Roman Empire, which is no roads, no cities, no ceramics. Okay, that's not what I wouldn't like it, because it also means people dying when they're 40. If we want to maintain a certain level and share it with more people, we need to drastically reduce the level of matter and energy that we're using in our production system. But I think exactly that's what peer production actually offers as a potential. But the key thing for me is to think really in terms of mode of production. Not just, we're going to use another money, we're going to do this. No, it's really about rethinking from the ground up, because no civilization, no economic system has ever changed without fundamentally changing its mode of production and its social structure. Everything else is peanuts. Yeah. But what I propose is not to shout against capitalism, right? It's actually to do it first. Everything you do is about changing the mode of production. And the politics is an expression of that. We need to do it. But not by, you know, it's not about shouting. It's actually, you think about a divorce. As long as you're fighting, you have a couple, right? And you're putting energy in it. And then one day you say, this is not going to work. And you stop fighting and you start looking elsewhere, right? You no longer give energy to the relationship, right? And this is what we're doing. In so many things that we do, we are actually feeding the beast. And I'm not saying that everybody should change 100%. It's impossible. You know, I'm also like that. I have a huge carbon footprint. And other things that you don't want to know. But anyway, yeah. So the thing is not to see us as individuals who need to change 100%, but to look at ourselves as a network where everybody passionately works on one particular aspect, right? And so we're all working in the same direction. We are mutually aligned in what we are trying to achieve, which is a fundamental shift in the mode of production. And money has a place in that, production, consumption, everything. But the idea is this contributing to creating an alternative mode of production which is not based on pseudo-abundance, that the world is infinite, and which is not based on artificial scarcity, right? All the laws which prevent us to cooperate. Just an example from the US. It's forbidden to collect rainwater. It's forbidden to dry your clothes in the sun. It's forbidden to grow vegetables in front of your house. There's hundreds of rules like that. It's forbidden to sell your marmalade to your neighbor. Yeah? There's hundreds of rules like that, making it impossible for us to share and cooperate. So we also need to work on the legal front, right?
I'm extraordinarily grateful for what you've told us. But one factor you haven't really dwelt on, perhaps because it's too obvious, is the way in which this all is a realization of a more fundamental human sociality. Mm-hmm. I remember spending a long time decades ago, thinking about, as a middle-class employee, how the institutions that I could work in stopped me using my abilities socially. You know, teachers who couldn't do what was best for their children because they had to serve the system in different ways, or car makers making cars that they knew were unsafe or polluted or whatever. In a way, the difference, I suppose, between exchange value and use value. But what you're talking about, what it has going for it, which seems most important, is that it's the kind of social interaction, transaction that in a way, I think, fits our nature best. I wonder whether you can say a little more about that.
So there is a mistaken impression that peer production is about altruism. It's not. Although it has a little part in it. So here's how I see it. This is like a broad historical pop summary. Think about life in the Middle Ages. People believe in God in one way, and other people believe in God in another way. And they're the bad guys. We need to kill them, right? So people thought they were good and they were righteous. And I see capitalism and liberalism as a reaction against that, a reaction against 3 centuries of religious civil war in Europe, which wiped out up to 1/3 of the population. So what did we say? Well, what Adam Smith, what did he say? He said, well, let's recognize we're all selfish. And if we're all selfish and we recognize it, then the common good will follow from that. So it was a fundamental civilizational shift and response to a deep, deep crisis of European civilization. And what are we saying now? The liberals are telling us, if we're all selfish, things will be fine. Well, it's not true. And now we know it. We're destroying the very planet that we need. We're creating more inequality, not less. So the answer, of course, is not to say we should all be good, because we're not. But what neoliberalism is saying is we're only selfish, and that's the only thing that counts. And what P2P is saying is we're complex beings, we have varied motivations. Let's build a social system which allows every individual to freely contribute the best of his nature to a common project. And so we use the notion of equipotentiality. So it's not about ranking people, you're better than me. It's about saying, I'm better than you in making a wiki. You're better than me in history, etc. And because the system is open and transparent, you know exactly where to put your effort. And then you get recognition from your peers according to your contribution, and you build your identity based on these contributions. Could be more than one. So every human being is going to be engaged in different commons to which he contributes. And he has his co-op where he creates his livelihood, right? And many things follow from that. For example, if we are engaged in a common construction, it has to be participatory, because you're not going to tell me what to do. I'm contributing out of my own free will, so you're not going to tell me what to do. Then in terms of property, so that's governance. In terms of property, if Razagin can tell me after 2 months, it's mine, I put a copyright on it, then of course nobody's going to help him after that. So you can't privatize that common work either. So from this basic relationship that we're all communally shareholding, community creating, comes all kinds of social and cultural consequences that will take time, but that are already starting to... What I notice, this is what fundamentally makes me an optimist. And to the pessimist, I always say I'm a pathological optimist, right? So this is it. I see the culture changing. I see young people in Europe massively switching to collaborative modes of interacting with each other. I'm not saying 100%. I don't know how many. It's 30, it's 40, it's 20, I don't know. But there's a massive shift towards easy modes of... try an unconference. A conference is a self-organized conference. You do it with people of my age, it's a mess. We can't do it. We're posturing. You do it with 20-year-olds, it rolls. No problem. I have my theory on that, and here is it. It's a good thing that baby boomers have done. Because the bad thing is neoliberalism, right? Okay, here's the good thing. We are the first generation which has democratically educated our children. We have massively applied partner parenting. And this makes it, because okay, in the 60s, I was 10, but I was premature. So in the 60s, we were revolting against hierarchy, but we didn't have any tools. We didn't know how to do it. I lived in 3 communes. A spiritual one, a political one, and a sex one, right? You know why they broke up? The dishes. Nobody wanted to do the dishes. So this is why the 60s didn't work. We had an aspiration, but we didn't have the skills. Yeah. Now there's a study about communes. There's much more communes today than in the 60s, but nobody talks about it. And they last 40 years. We've learned something. And the reason is that our children have learned to be autonomous, to think by themselves, to freely choose what they wanted to study and to work. And I think this has fundamentally changed the cultural basis. And we knew this. And the internet just has proven it. How was what happened to me, right? We live in a world where everybody's saying everybody is selfish. And then suddenly you start working with people and it's easy. And then you think, and that's the next step, why can't I live like that? And I think this is what's happening. Young people are saying, if we can do it there, why can't we do it there? So they started with co-working, hacker spaces, fab labs, maker spaces, and these are cultural hubs. So people are socializing online, but they're also socializing within these spaces. They're all entrepreneurs, they're doing different things, but they talk to each other, they learn from each other, they mutualize their accounting, they mutualize their different things, and they just... And so it's not political per se, but it's a deep, deep shift in our cultural vision of the world. And this is driving the revolution, if you like. Just as at the end of the Roman Empire, the Christian was saying work is good. And the Roman elite was saying work is bad, it's for slaves, right? So they were building this alternative value system. So a revolution is always first and foremost a cultural, epistemological revolution. The rest... that is after.
Oops, this was so beautiful and challenging. My head hasn't hurt so much in a long time.
I only want female groupies, and I don't have them yet.
No, but at the same time, I mean, really, really good because it troubled me as well, and that's probably the best kind of talk. Just three troubles. One was the whole networked society and networked, right, it goes hand in hand with a kind of complexity thinking and complexity understandings of how things are and how they develop and so on and so forth. Yet your explanation is quite linear in the sense of it's kind of it's a historical materialism, you like states, a dialectic, one sort of force that takes it forward. So I was just wondering what kind of, if there's a tension there. The second thing was just about every argument comes out of a context, and every author is a context, and you're a context, I'm a context, everyone else. And so again, I was wondering, how far does this argument resonate for people who are far from that context? 58% of the world's population aren't even online yet, and many of the 42% who are quite marginally online. So how far is this really going? And the third trouble, I've been really interested in internet governance recently. Because a lot of, especially the global infrastructure of the internet, is governed in a very, I mean, states are on the margins. They basically don't hardly know what's going on. And so it's a place where registrars and registries, and it's all, and the language is much of what comes with. It's about civil society. It's about resilience. It's about bottom up. It's about multi-stakeholder, and et cetera, et cetera. When you go into the room, though, and actually see what's happening in the room, it's global north, it's white, it's professional class, it's male, it's middle-aged. It's, I mean, every hierarchy you want to name. The new world of a new governance is the most hierarchically concentrated power that I think I've seen anywhere. So how do we make sure that doesn't happen?
Okay, these are three complex questions. Well, the first one I can't really answer because, you know, I can't judge myself. Seriously, several people have told me, wow, you're a complex thinker, and I had never read any book about complexity. So this is the first time I hear the opposite. I'm ready to accept it. I have no idea. But the resonance issue, that's maybe interesting, and it's not easy. For example, you know, I was in Holland about 2 weeks ago, and nobody understood a word I was saying. And the reason was, that's my interpretation, they were so steeped in this neoliberal thinking, and everything what I was saying just didn't fit in their presuppositions. On the other hand, I was in Ecuador, and you know where I got the only 3 standing ovations? Indigenous communities. I showed them pictures of global open farming communities and their machines, and they immediately said, this is for us. So it depends. It depends. It's not a. It's so the third is true to a certain extent. So, for example, in free software, it's overwhelmingly male. But I think the reason is cultural, not because of the structure, because it's really an open structure. But you know, there are cultural barriers. There's a lot of aggressivity in the communication. There's a lot of autists. There's all kinds of things which don't seem very attractive for a more feeling person. So what to do? Well, in free software, there are movements of women in free software. And they chose their names, Net Chicks and Cyber Girls and Linux this and that. So they're working on this, right? So it's not because you make a commons that you're necessarily left, feminist, not a racist. Doesn't have anything to do with it. You're producing a commons because you like Linux. And it only solves the problems of Linux. It doesn't solve the problems of the world, right? So the argument for me would be that's why we still need politics. That's why we still need meta-regulation and efforts and movements to fight against those inequalities within the commons movement. Now, if you look, for example, in open design, Arduino, Fab Labs, you will see a huge number of females. And they often actually lead the places. Same with co-working. A lot of women in co-working. I also think, and this is true, that it's first and foremost coming from the cognitive workers. Right? So there we have also a problem. How do we deal with less cognitive oriented people? So, I don't have the answers and the solutions for all of that. But one of the things that we can do, for example, is make maker spaces big enough that it's not just about 3D printing, but it's about wood, it's about textile, it's about, and see it in this inclusive way and attract different people. I've seen some of those places doing that. Like in Barcelona, there was a maker space. There was 1 geek and 15 non-geeks. And they were making Tibetan potions and and fashion and all kinds of stuff, and it was absolutely not a geek place. But this requires effort, mobilization, thinking. It's not going to come automatically, right? It's, yeah. So it's true what you say about that. There is an issue there, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if I really understand everything that you said, but then I just want to find out if you can comment on the same peer-to-peer with what happened in like places like I think Egypt and China. Like the social network was used to mobilize the downfall and liberation. So how do you think the governments would respond to that?
Well,
where they can just cut it off?
Yeah, I think you should see the internet as a tool, and this tool can be used by everyone with their own perspective, right? So when Al-Qaeda used the internet, it's to plot a bomb thing. And so the tool itself is not enough. You have to be socio-technical, not just technical. So one of the things I would critique about Jeremy Rifkin in his book is that he has a technocratic point of view. The technology is there, and therefore this will happen. Now, if you look at my book, and this maybe is a little argument against our colleague here, I work with scenarios. I actually don't work with a linear future. I have 4 scenarios, right? Given certain things and balance of forces, this is what the world could look like or not. And it depends on us. I mean, to a certain degree, we can't do everything. But it's certainly, my vision is not a vision of linear progress or technocracy. It's really how people will use it and organize themselves around it. But I do think ideas are very important. Ideas are a material force. By speaking here, I have changed your consciousness, right? Yeah. To a certain degree. But certainly you will think differently after this. And my most important motivation is we need a new narrative. And maybe it's not going to work for everyone. But at least in my world, it works. Because the traditional left narrative, let's nationalize the mines. Yeah, maybe. But it's still going to be crap. Right? Right? So if you just say that, it's no longer credible. So I didn't actually answer that question, so let me tell you a little bit about this. So there are efforts today, for example, like the Fair Phone. Okay? The Fair Phone is a project to trace back the supply chain all the way up to the mine, starting from an ethical mine, where people have a living wage, are treated, have union rights, etc., etc. And all the way up the supply chain, everything should be open and verifiable. So that's one project. Another one is the Ethical Filament Foundation. So the problem with 3D printing is that the plastic is actually toxic. And most geeks don't know that. And I see them working and sniffing the glue. It's bad news. They're really excited about 3D printing, and this is toxic, right? So don't count on those guys to do the revolution because they won't be there. So here's the Ethical Filament Foundation. They work with waste pickers in India, get the plastic, detoxify it, I don't know exactly how that works, and then make 3D printing filament with it. So this is the way we have to think about it. How do we do inclusion? How do we avoid extractive practices? And so it's not just making a comment, it's not enough. We have to think through all these aspects when we do peer production. And that's not easy to do because most people don't have, they're only good at one thing, they may be only interested in 2 things. So we need to do it as a movement, right? Aligning ourselves and talking to each other. So for example, here, there's the other slide. So this is what we do with the P2P Foundation. So for example, here we organize between openness and solidarity, we organize deep dives. We invite 20 to 30 people, 15 from the cooperative world, solidarity world, and 15 from the commons world. And we let them talk together. open circular economy. We take hardware people, and then we take sustainability people, and we let them talk to each other. This is the only way I know that we can actually achieve this. I just have to create these dialogues and conversations, and then we can have convergence. So it's going to be a long, hard slog, but we'll get there.
So, good evening, and I also agree. It was a brilliant presentation. I'm still Rasikan Miraj from Erie. I want to pick up on what you raised about balance of forces, because I think it is also quite important, and it's an issue that touches maybe on the politics that we speak about. A lot, especially in your responses to the questions, Michel, have delved on the social and cultural aspects. But these, as norms and values, also have a space that's allocated to it by a particular political economy. And within that, the role that institutions play, and I want to ground that in where we are physically now, inside a university itself. How then do these structures, which are very much enablers of the mode of production you are asking that we transcend, how do they open up the spaces for such peer-to-peer working and getting to learn by working together?
Yeah.
Whereas the incentive structures...
He said thanks to God.
There we go. But the incentive structures are against this. So the incentive structures seek to have individuals, and I don't know whether UP is at that stage yet, but from publish or perish to patent or perish within the public space that's given to us. So some thoughts from you, some advice about how universities can maybe even play a catalytic role.
I'm going to start with a quote from Kevin Kelly, who said some time ago, it's going to get worse and worse, and better, faster and faster. So I think that the dominant system is getting worse and worse. And precisely because that is happening, more and more people are looking for alternatives. So that's the bright side of the bad, evolution. And frankly, I agree with you. I mean, with all respect for the people, because you're good people, but the system doesn't allow you to be good, right? And it's the same in corporations. This is why we need to change those structures. And I don't think it's going to start here, frankly. What has to happen is there are alternatives that look good enough to move the elites into adapting to the new. Same with corporations. They didn't become green because they suddenly started seeing the light. It's because there was a green movement. And they were putting pressure, and I said, we have to do this. And with universities, I think the current form of university is catastrophic. I think most academics are frustrated, depressed. I was an academic for 4 years. I never had so little time to read. It's terrible. And I go to England, and I see all these, professors, and they are in tiny little, it's awful. It's awful. But one thing you can do is invite me, for a funded think tank, because that's what I'm looking for. I want to do a commons think tank, because there's green think tanks, so I'm looking for an institution that can support this. So, okay, some things. Create connections with makers, right? Because one of the big problems of the university is this kind of division between knowing and doing. Now we have a model where the people who design are also making, and the people who are making are thinking about what they're doing. So this is a very important shift and a recreation of the crafts worker. I think you should do something else about informal knowledge. So one of the things we did in Ecuador, so here is a little anecdote. Ecuador has a very good free software law for public institutions. They can't apply it because the computer scientists with a degree don't want to work for the government if they can earn 4 times more outside. But they have thousands of young people who know how to code. So if you have an open accreditation system, They exist like open badges from Mozilla Foundation and stuff, and you connect them somehow with the university, you can start recognizing informal knowledge and build bridges between those two worlds. Because frankly, I mean, I'm probably exaggerating, but I see so much innovation in these open design communities that I don't see coming from universities. And pharmaceutical industry is not innovating anymore. They're all stuck. You know what they do? They buy up little companies and then they destroy them, right? That's what they do. So the innovation today is really there, out there, in these semi-formal, informal, and building bridges. And eventually the nature of the university will change. Think about the history of knowledge. We had academies in Greece, collapsed. We had the Christian monks. Then we had the universities in the cities. We were peer-to-peer. The first university was a peer-to-peer university in Bologna. The students managed the university and chose and paid their professors. Great, isn't it? Then that started decaying because of the religious civil wars. And then in the 18th century, we have the reinvention of the university in Germany, right, which produced Karl Marx. And that model is also at its end. We need to find new ways to... But of course, if you have a job, keep it, because guys like us, we need you. No, all my friends are precarious, right? So we need extra guest rooms, and we need things to be able to... So don't quit your job, all of you. Some of you, yes, but not all of you. Yeah. By the way, just one thing. If you have too much money, this is what you should do. Send us some fair coin. Yeah? Here. Just a button. This is fair coin. Fair coin is the first ethical global cryptocurrency. Yeah? That is being designed. We cooperate with the Catalan Integral Cooperative to create a socially sovereign currency for global open cooperatives. Okay.
So Michel,
you have to do it, right? You have to do it.
Coming from a different angle, I'm here. My name is Louise, and I've kind of decided I'm going to focus the rest of my life on South Africa, and specifically on doing something that has arguably no commercial value, but this country needs for us to work together to fix our education system. Government education, there's no money to be made. But you said something about kind of these networks of people who are working towards a common goal. So the common goal is quality education for all our children in South Africa. And they are doing it in the most innovative ways and collaborating across networks, a huge amount of design thinking, etc., etc. How does that fit into your P2P foundation? Because I can't see the place where that kind of work, and is it something you're interested in? Or is it, because, I think that the world's problems will be solved, I think, not just by making stuff and producing stuff that we can sell, but actually by working together to deal with the really significant social issues. So I'm just curious to know how that fits into your story.
Well, okay, my world, of course, I'm a knowledge worker, and I've been socialized by the internet and stuff like that. So I come from a very particular world, and that biases me like everyone, right? We all have our biases. But if you're from the kind of world of social movements, I think, what I would say is, what do you do with all that knowledge, right? Do you keep it just locally, small, or you want to share it? Well, then you create a knowledge commons. It doesn't have to be text. It can be videos. It can be interviews. It can be drawings. It can be recipes. It can be scenarios for theater. It's just a way of thinking of how do we mutualize our knowledge at a scale that allows us to compete with multinational companies, eventually. No, okay. See, I don't mean compete in that sense, because you're not doing the same thing. But the function that you want to do with your thing has to be able to withstand the pressure of the dominant system, right? And therefore you can't just say, okay, let's say you're a fisherman and you say, okay, I'm going to make a fishery commons. Great. But 50 kilometers outside of your national boundary, the Russian or whatever ships are still passing by and sucking up your fish. You know what I mean? So you always have to deal with, you can't just do your thing in your little garden. It's not going to, yeah.
So I think that's what's so interesting.
Yeah.
Because the work in this world that I'm talking about, we are utilizing the knowledge for the greater good, but there's no competition. Because
Yeah.
no one else is doing it.
Okay.
So there isn't someone else. So the interesting thing is that when you start to do things because it's just the right things to do for our children and for our country, and we are mutualizing, we are kind of, the knowledge is being shared, etc., and there is a lot of working together, and the intention is not to kind of go out and now tell the rest of the world. We're doing it for South Africa and for our children. But I'm just curious, because I think there's a kind of equally interesting world happening out there with that kind of work going. But it doesn't sound as if that's your area of interest. But I'm just saying, it'd be wonderful if you could get interested in it.
I would have to know more. So my concern is, so peer-to-peer is not going to be everything. And there's going to be many hybrid forms. And there will be some new things and then some older things. Think about the Catholic Church. They lived in the Roman Empire, they lived in the feudal system, they live in the capitalist system. They adapted successfully. And knowing what I know about the new Pope, he'll adapt to peer-to-peer. Is actually the new encyclical will be about the commons, believe it or not. That's what I heard from yeah. Okay, so what I'm saying is the following. So what you're doing is very important, but my concern is really changing the system at its core, right? And for that, this is what I think, don't have to agree, that without peer-to-peer, we won't be able to do it. That doesn't mean that your thing is important, you have to do it, but if you think in terms of really systemic change, then that's my view, this is the way. This is, yeah. 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 Okay. Well, we'll need to talk more about it because I'm not sure how you work and stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll end it here. It's almost 7 o'clock. We're over time, but it was certainly worth it. Michel, last year our board meeting and the governed board suggested us to find an added value where govern could add value to the research community, to the think tank community, etc. And we made rethinking development our motto, the objective that we wanted to pursue. And I think your presentation here today was perfect and contributed really to what we think is necessary, is the rethinking of development. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful presentation. I also wanted to thank the presenters yesterday, the presenter of the first keynote speaker, Raj Patel, because they also contributed to it, and all of you that have this week and still tomorrow continue to rethink development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bart. Thank you.